Um, I'm here representing 11 and 12, and we sorted ourselves out in subgroups, standard subgroups, not substandard groups. I, in particular, have been working with Leah 12, and Jackie Goff McNish has been trying to join. Sure that she will. So I wanted to start off showing this is the first element of this standard, telling us that we must show that we're offering a program of general education of sufficient scope to enhance students' intellectual growth and equivalent to at least 15 semester hours for associate degree programs and 30 semester hours baccalaureate programs. We got curious about how this might be compared 12 or the equivalent study, and at will briefly tell us about. I'll just hold on to it.
It's on, right? Okay. So, so I took at the Middle States document, Characteristics of Excellence. So this is the one, publication date 2009, that we're working off of. And I went back to the publication, the previous publications, same Characteristics of Excellence. That's publication date 2002. So that's the one we were operating off of at the last self-study. And I found that there were really very small, almost insignificant, in some ways, changes. In the overall standard description, there were a couple of word changes where in 2002, it said that our general education essential skills, including oral and written communication, scientific and quantitative reasoning, critical analysis and reasoning, technological competency, and information literacy. And then now, how it reads is general education essential skills, including at least, so at least wasn't in the first one, at least oral and written communication, scientific and quantitative reasoning, critical analysis and reasoning, and technological competency. So notice information literacy was removed. So, but they added at least to give that flexibility. As far as the description of what should be in there, it was very much the same. Where the differences were was actually language was removed, not added. So from 2002, there's language that was removed. And again, it was more to specifically define general education other than this big kind of global picture of oral and written communication, scientific. So the things that are basically RISLO, right? So RISLO, at least, that's the same. So in doing that research, it made sense to then look at what we had about general education in the last self-study because requirements really hadn't changed. And the only change that's been made in our requirements for credit limit affected our lives. Before that, the only changes were it used to, we had to have 10. The 10 were supposed to be in the uni silos, supposed to be in the associate's degree, and now it's 7 of 10, 30 credits. That change was already a couple years ago. So other than that, there were not really what we needed to have then and what we. However, some of the other things required with how we describe our general education. Right now, we don't have a description. We're working on it. So we're working on list transfer or credit provides more push to work. I believe that Tony and I, in looking at the standard, would have pushed. I think we should be doing. We need to have it find curriculum.
This is what attracted our attention. One thing that element here, that we need to have our general described in publication. Very basic requirement. What do we have in this regard? I mean, if a student has been on this campus, find is paragraph, state, they would find that labyrinth of. What do I have to do? And we have a core curriculum. That core curriculum, in the curriculum, God, it will catch if something's not making. So I think technically, requirements, alert and so, but hasn't been any effort. Purpose of general education requirements at DCC. And the question arises, what? And we're in the group doing that, we're working on the middle state self-study, and we're thinking, well, it's our job maybe to make this recommendation, but not necessarily our job, certainly to carry out that recommendation. But we found it impossible not to get involved in a discussion about what we should be doing about this. And I guess the steering committee kind of felt that that was an example of what should be happening while we're in the process of this self-study. We should be combing through these elements, looking for loopholes, seeing where we can do better, and having conversations that we don't otherwise take the time to have. So we were thinking about what we could do, not to put burdens on other departments, but what we might do in the orientation process to talk to students about general education and the core curriculum, how we could improve what's in the catalog, put something up front on the website, and so on. So perhaps our recommendation might come out with a few more details. I'm just curious if anybody has thought about this issue, particularly since we've been talking nonstop on the listserv about the core curriculum and general education. Has anybody thought about what we should be saying to students about general education and the core? Because I've seldom met a student who has any clue why it says on their program page, footnote D, you must take higher than a 200 level course in bloppity blop and schleppity schlepp in order to get this degree, and they don't have a clue why that is the case.
So,
Yes, Leah.
right, so I should grab that.
You don't need it now. I went to Plan B.
Okay. So, from my perspective and looking at this, when first looking at it from the Middle State Standard, I considered looking at when my own daughters transferred from here. So my one daughter graduated in 2009 from here, my other in 2011, both transferred. And one transferred to Suffolk University in Boston, the other to Temple University in Philadelphia. And I've been their academic advisor their whole way, so I continue to do so even though they were at other colleges. And I found it much easier to see what the general education programs were at the other schools. It was obvious, actually. There was a clear page for the students. These are the general education requirements for the institution. This is why. And then as even in now the subcommittee on general education, that we've done some benchmarking, it appears to be a growing trend. More and more schools, there's still, I'd say in New York State, it seems that the community colleges are a little bit behind, so we're actually right with our peers being behind on this. But that there is a growing trend, and it might be being pushed by the accreditation agencies to do a better job of it. So I don't think we're way out of line in any way. But I did start thinking about it as a parent and just looking at it, wow, it's really clearly defined here for these other schools. I didn't see that same definition here in Dutchess.
Joanne?
It has struck me for a long time, and partly because of my own children's situations where they went to school, that a lot of schools will pick something. They had a freshman and sophomore seminar, and that was where a group of ideas was supposed to come together, and they were exposed to a lot of different reading, and they had to write and things like that. But it was very clear what the college was trying to do through that, through that coursework. And I've never found it clear here what general education means to us. And I don't think we, as faculty, are necessarily clear. And Lee, I know I've heard you speak often about the fact that just a collection of courses doesn't make a gen ed program. I believe you said that. Forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I believe you said something similar to that. And I think that we do have to really think about, is it more than a collection? What are we trying to accomplish with this? And how are we accomplishing it? And I don't think that we have, across disciplines, I don't think that we have a good sense of how this comes together to some holistic picture. I don't think we have that sense at all. And I don't know that we've ever grappled with it, and maybe we are exactly where all the other community colleges are. But it struck me that we ought to really work to create some core foundation that we really do feel exposes students to a collection of things that operate more than in isolation, but that really do build into something that we then would say, oh, this is our gen ed program. So I'm all for having more discussion about it. I think that we have to figure out philosophically what gen ed is to us. And I guess I'm saying I think of it as more than just a hodgepodge of courses thrown together. Now, I know we have the Common Core. I'm sure that in the 80s, when that was developed, there was probably some discussion as to why that made sense then, but that's not something that has been continued to be communicated to us as, we don't have that in our culture as faculty. Like, I don't have any idea why those courses were chosen. I'm sure there was some really good discussion about it at the time.
Well, and then some other research that I did on this. I went through and looked at all the curriculum committee handbooks that we have archived in the library. So back to the first one, and just went through and looked at the development of the language, since the general education is defined only really in the curriculum committee handbook to see. And you couldn't even find then any clear reasons and justifications. I mean, I'm sure at that time, they must have had discussions. And it would just take a lot more research to find minutes of meetings that would hopefully maybe clarify somewhat what those discussions were, but they did not include it in the curriculum committee handbook. There's little to grab onto there to understand why that became the common curriculum. And by the way, we're trying to stay away from calling it Common Core. So Common Curriculum.
And if we go back to 1987 in the Curriculum Committee minutes, we find that June Pearson did this extraordinary pulling together of the history, and that these academic core courses were brought to us from Orange Community College in 1958, and essentially, with some name changes, have been there, and we've started a couple of times. We started in 87, we tried again somewhere around 92, but we never really had a full conversation. We just kept perpetuating this core academic set of courses that was based on a book from a guy from Harvard that said this is how you create a democratic society, is give them a breadth of course exposure in a liberal arts core. But as a college, we've never really had a meaningful conversation about why that's what we do or how we do it, but it has been part of our history from the start, and John Hall brought it to us. I mean, that's in our curriculum committee minutes.
Right, I'd forgotten that. If you want to copy importation.
Yeah, yeah. And I published a couple of times about that in both discussion and today.
Sarah.
Just wanted to point out that the discussion you guys are having, we've discussed this a little bit in our Gen Ed subcommittee, the idea that once our Gen Ed subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of curriculum committee, is done, and we have come to curriculum committee with a recommendation, it might be time for campus to create some sort of ongoing committee that discusses just this. Because we're having this conversation that back in the 80s, they must have discussed this. In the 90s, they must have discussed this. Maybe it should be more of a formal process, that this is something that's continuously looked at and discussed and brought back to departments, and we consider Gen Ed something we continuously discuss and think about. Change.
Well, that's some of what we've been doing with Standard 12. There's two other aspects of Standard 12 that we've been looking at. One is a line about making sure that the programs are using appropriate technology in their teaching. And I'm sure there's people in this room who responded to my request for information about technology that's being used in the programs. And most of that kind of information will end up in an appendix, with maybe some examples in the narrative, because there's just too much of it. And we also have the, in Standard 12, the famous reference to being sure that general education covers values, ethics, and diversity in some meaningful way. And that, of course, has led to discussions about the role of BHS 103 in that, and whether other courses can carry that load, and how we should approach that. So those are the things we've been talking about in the Standard 12 subgroup. Is there anything else anybody would like to ask or say? Well, he's not raising his hand, he's operating the camera. All right, if that's the case, I can turn it over to Bill. Bill, are you ready? No?
You don't need that. I'm on Plan B now, so it's out of
Plan B.
Gotta have a backup.
Okay. One of the things in this one falls into actually a couple different standards, and that's information technology. It falls under standards, in terms of planning, which is 2. It falls under 3, which is allocation of resources. And it also falls under 5. There's another piece under 5 that talks a little bit about how resources are allocated, and are the resources sufficient to support the things that are going on. So what I'd like to do today is to give an update on where we are with information technology at Dutchess. I'm going to focus on 5 kind of questions or statements that I want to look at. One, do we all understand what functional areas fall under IT? IT covers a wide range of services that are provided and support that's provided. A little bit about, well, you do have a staff there. Do you know who actually is in IT and IT staff? Want to talk quite a bit about the projects that are underway. There's a lot going on in terms of IT. A lot of it is stuff that you won't see, but I think it's important that you all are aware of those things that are going on. And then a little bit about what is needed for middle states related to technology, and then what's next in terms of, we have current projects, but where really are we going with IT? And I want to talk a little bit about what I have planned in terms of that. Now, in terms of IT as an operation, kind of just a laundry list of things that it's responsible for. We have the network and technology infrastructure, which is really very complex. It's actually extensive. We've invested a lot of money in the infrastructure, and we are continuing, again, to provide that support. And that, again, is an area that Patrick can probably go on for hours and hours of all the things that they're having to do on a continual basis to make the network as reliable as possible. The next whole area is application support. And one of the things that, when you stop and you say, okay, there's softwares, but when you look at the inventory of the softwares that are currently being supported, I think there was about 8 pages of different softwares that are on this campus that have to be supported, and not only supported, but also integrated into the rest of the system, which sounds simple. But I used the example recently, they added Heartland, which is a vending software to put money on the cards and stuff like that. That had to be integrated into our systems. It did not come easily. A lot of hours were spent trying to make those bridges and sharing of information. So it's always great to say, let's go out and get this software application, we'll do this. But all those ramifications of how it impacts all the other systems come into play. So in terms of application support, there are all the applications that are out in the academic units. And then there's also the administrative system side, which is the banner side. Primarily, there's other administrative systems that are also dealt with. Most recently is DegreeWorks. DegreeWorks, SUNY came out and said, we're going to go to DegreeWorks. We're going to provide you with certain level of support in terms of implementing it. And DegreeWorks really takes the place, and I'm forgetting of what the banner component is.
CAP.
It takes CAP, which is difficult to use. It's not intuitive in terms of how to do it. DegreeWorks is basically a very nice program. Students are able to go into it. They can look at what courses they have. They should be able to look at what they need for degree requirements. And once if it's fully implemented, which here's the problem, is New York State, they've talked about putting DegreeWorks in, but only to this level. For DegreeWorks to really work effectively, all the schools that you want to transfer have to be involved in the process of evaluating our courses in terms of transferability. That's not even on the deck right now or on the plan right now in terms of that level. I came out of New Jersey, and it took us about 8 to 9 years to get to that point where DegreeWorks would allow us, or type program like Degree, so a student at Dutchess could go and look at whatever school in the state they wanted to go to and see which courses are transferable, which ones were not, for which degree they wanted to do. SUNY is not there yet. We will have DegreeWorks, and IT has spent a lot of time with DegreeWorks getting it up and ready to go. And we're kind of ahead of the curve in terms of some of the other schools in that regard. End user support is another one. The help desk. If you have an issue, you call the help desk. But then there's also the ongoing desktop computer. If it's not working, someone has to come help get you back online. Or if one of the applications you're using isn't working right. An example, we did a Kronos upgrade for timekeeping, and yet we still had to have people come out because depending on which desktop you had or which system you had, there were small glitches. And every time you do an upgrade, we often run into that issue of an application issue. And then we have a lot of academic program support, particularly in PVAC. We also have the theater. Our staff also supports all of those plays and concerts, and all those things that go on within the theater are also supported there. Also, in terms of that, all the equipment loans for communications and stuff, a student needs to take out cameras, that's all handled under IT as well. And then we have telecommunications, which is all of our phones and other forms of communication, stuff like that. Example, we have contracts and leases with Illinois Mountain, which allows us, in terms of our TV station and radio station, or I guess radio stations now only done over the internet. We actually were looking into that today because we have to pay for a license for the campus for music to be used in any of our programs and over our radio station. Also copying and printing, all that coordination, again, as we get more sophisticated in terms of copiers and printing, networking of printers, all that stuff, it all takes support and protocol. So these are functional areas that fall under IT. I don't know if I've missed any. Klaus, have I missed any?
All the smart classroom.
Okay, so I guess I was looking at it as under the academic support. But yeah, all of the classrooms, all of the projectors, all of those things need to be supported. This is an organizational chart. Might be a little bit tough to read, but you can see how they're broken down basically into the infrastructure, applications. We have desktop support. We have instructional media support that's out there and supporting academic programs. We do have the whole network to maintain, and then the help desk and all of those services that go with the help desk. Current projects. Over the last 18 months, we've taken a look at what are the critical areas that we had, looking at what we had done historically in terms of our systems. We then were looking at what is some of the criticals what we needed to do. And one of those things when we did an inventory of our end user equipment, we looked at the backbone infrastructure equipment. We started looking at in classrooms in terms of an age distribution of the equipment, and it became very clear that the institution had not kept up with replacements the way it needed to. In order to keep technology where it needed to be in terms of, again, replacement, and what were some of our critical fail points that we needed to address. And we're going to talk a little bit about the different projects that we've done. One of the areas in terms of the network, the main backbone of our network was installed in 2003. We're now 10 years down the road. When that was installed, it was state-of-the-art at 1 gigabyte in terms of the speed of the backbone of our whole campus infrastructure. Today, the standard is at least 10, or the standard is 10. So over the summer, we've been working to start to replace that. And when we talk about the backbone structure, it goes all the way from the main switch in which the network comes into the campus. It's then distributed out to the buildings. We have building switches in all of these buildings, usually about 2 in each, some 3 depending on the size. And then from down there it goes to what they call edge units. So the edge units each have 20, is it 10 or 20 ports in them? 24. So every time you think about a computer, it's got to go back to one of those. So if you think of all the computers we have, they'll tell you that when we get to the point of the edges, switches were somewhere around 100 plus edge switches on this campus in terms of all those access ports throughout the campus. So that is not fully done yet. We are rolling it out. I believe the core switch conversion is scheduled shortly.
Hopefully soon.
Hopefully very soon. We are already starting to replace them at the building levels and some of the end levels, but we need to do the core, and that will bring the whole backbone speed up. One of the things that also came across the campus is power disruptions. If you have a building go down and you have switches and you bring the power back up, the switches are vulnerable to burning out and also instability of the network. So we have installed uninterrupted power supplies in each of our buildings, which basically allows us about an hour or so to shut down the system gradually and properly, as opposed to just a quick off and then back on, which is the worst case scenario for the network. Because a lot of times when it comes back up, not all the switches come back up. So you'll have a building that'll go down, comes back up, and this floor has connectivity, this one doesn't. Creates a lot of unreliability. The other one is also, just as we talk about technology, and the more we use it, the more data we create, the more storage capacity that we have, and then there's the issue of backup. So what's happening is you get to the point you have so much data you're backing up that it takes a long time to back it up. We've implemented a new software system to facilitate that backup, and I don't remember the change, but it was from, I don't know, how many hours to about an hour?
Typical would be like something that took an hour, and now it takes 6 minutes.
So, and since you're backing up on a daily basis, a lot of that stuff, you're looking at what takes place. It also allowed us to be more effective in terms of how we do our backup. The other one is we're putting more and more virtual desktops out there. We brought in a disk array, which is another large storage capacity unit that's broken into many, many servers. We used to talk about servers as a single box. Now we're talking about a disk array, which is a huge structure, and I'm not sure the technology itself, but you partition it out, and those are all individual servers that serve a certain population of desktops. So that's the project that's been underway since early in the summer related to the network. It's continuing on, and we hope to have all that installed by the end of this semester. The next one was the end user support, all those desktop units. We are in the process of replacing approximately 850, or about 42% of the total population of desktop end users, and that includes the PCs, laptops, and also the majority are the virtual desktops. And we are working at, again, some of the infrastructure that was needed beforehand. So the units are here. We now have the storage capacity and other stuff in place, so we are starting to roll these out. We're going to roll them out as fast as we possibly can in terms of getting them onto people's offices and stuff like that. We have a number of teaching labs that are scheduled to be replaced between the semesters. So by the time the spring semester rolls around, most of those units will be out. We're also, the help desk gets about 3,000 inquiries a year from students to change their password. So we are working, I'm not sure where we are on that project, to be able to do an automated resetting of the passwords, particularly for our students. And then we're also, a lot of times we have all these distribution lists within MyDCC, and they're not kept up to speed. People leave, people come. We're trying to automate that application so that when they're identified, it keeps automatically will update that. The other area is we have a phone system that the whole infrastructure is just shy of 30 years old, and we've kind of been keeping it together year after year, kind of holding it together, and it really reached a point where we just have to start doing something to replace it. And obviously then the modern technology is voice over IP, along with the upgrade of the network and the power supplies that allows us to go to voice over IP. And we are in the process of replacing about 750 phones on campus with voice over IP. A number of buildings have already been completed. There are more going on. As we implement the switches, we're bringing more and more phones on over the voice over IP. The other one we'll also do is we will have those in the classrooms as we go. So once it's fully installed, we will have these phones in the classrooms. The thing that's important is that this does provide us with the opportunity to start to be able to push out a message. So basically, if we have, which is part of the safety committee is looking at it, is how do we get it so that if we have a situation on campus where there's an emergency, whatever, we can push that message out, and it will go out to all of the phones. The last system that I looked at putting this in, as long as the person was not on the phone, if just in their office, they would become a speaker saying, you know, we have a campus emergency, this is a lockdown, we have an active shooter. All those types of messages could be broadcasted out across the campus. So it's just one step as we look towards campus security. And then security. One of the things that we did, part of the master plan, we brought a consultant in under the master plan to take a look at our infrastructure related to security. One of the things that they looked at were the location of cameras. Back in the day when they first put a lot of these cameras in, they put them in hallways, they put them in places like that, which is much different than today's philosophy, which is really you're looking at points of entry and exit in terms of being able to see who's coming in, who's going out, as well as some common areas. But so a number of our cameras are not necessarily in the right locations. We've identified where we need to put them in terms of locations. and we will be installing new cameras in those spots, as well as the cameras that we had were, probably state-of-the-art back when we bought them, but today, in terms of being able to get a good quality picture, we are moving to high-quality cameras to allow us to have a better ability to go back and to do an investigation if something was to happen, and also to monitor people coming in and out of buildings. The other part of this was also the software that we had for our database management of incidents on campus. We did replace that with a much more user-friendly system, and that's in place and working very well. I talked a little bit earlier about the storage issue and storage capacity. One of the things that we have when we look at the cameras that we have in place now, it's a huge amount of storage, and we were able to also add storage. I believe somewhere around 40 terabytes of storage is allocated to video storage. And that's not even really being able to keep 30 days worth of storage for all of the cameras. So we also had to play with the amount of compression of the pictures and stuff like that in terms of storage. The other one is in terms of disaster recovery. We're just really starting the discussion about disaster recovery. You would think that would be something that had been discussed in the past. It has not. So we are now just starting that whole issue of disaster recovery. What would we do in different situations in terms of our technology? We know that if we lose technology, so much comes to a standstill. Even just simple things. We had an issue with the VMware last week, and just for that short period of time, the number of classes that were impacted by that small hiccup in the running of that software. So we can look and see how critical technology is to the everyday ongoings of the college. But we did install a domain controller at iTech. iTech is a consortium under SUNY, which allows us to warehouse or have servers and our software. Matter of fact, our whole banner system is actually located at iTech in Buffalo. They run a dual system in Albany. So at any one point in time, our system is really running in two different places, which either one of them are on our campus. In terms of copiers and printing, I've been kind of taking the lead a little bit on this. Over the summer, we participated with the county in terms of a bid to replace copiers on campus under a lease program versus purchase. The average age of our copiers, the majority of them are at least 6 years or older. The oldest, I believe, was 13 or 14 years old. And we went into that program, and we got a fantastic price. In terms of that, we're going on this. It's a lease program. It's 42 months. It means our costs are pretty much going to be flat for that period of time. Example right now, currently, we were paying about 1.2 cents for every copy for maintenance and supplies. Under this contract, we'll be paying 0.0042. So it'll be about 1/3 the cost of what we're currently paying, and that differential will pretty much almost offset the cost of the equipment. So it's a win-win for everybody. All of the operations on campus, where there are copiers that are at least older than 2010, because we are going to keep those through at least this lease, will receive a new copier. I think we have 24 of them. We've met with departments, we've got their input, and they are the new copiers, if everything goes smoothly, will be delivered on the 21st and 22nd of November, and we will be under that new contract and moving forward. And then as we go through that, these units all have the ability to be network printers as well as copiers, the ability to scan, all of that type of information, or all those type of capabilities are going to be available. And for those units that aren't using those, we can work with them to implement those. I just mentioned briefly Middle States. This is an open forum on Middle States. How does this tie back to Middle States? Well, Middle States wants to see when you're doing your budgeting and your financial planning, how are you looking at your resources? How are you making a determination on how to allocate your resources properly, most effectively? And then secondly, what strategies are we using to measure success? So as we look at all these, the changes and stuff, what is the success, or how are we going to assess, and how are we going to make changes going forward? One of the things when we started this and we're looking at technology, the last time that the institution has sat down or come together and said, what's our master plan for technology, was in 2006. So obviously that plan has no bearing on where we are today. So given this and the fact that we really should have a technology plan or master plan, we are going to start that process. And last week I had a retreat, or a small retreat for a couple hours with the IT staff to start talking about what are some of the opportunities and challenges that we have in the IT area, what are the things we need to keep our eye on or think about as we go forward with technology. And so this year, similar to academic units doing program reviews, we are going to be doing a program review for IT as an administrative unit. We're going to try to set up the formula or standard way in which we look at administrative units to evaluate if they're working effectively. Are they really supporting the mission? Are they supporting our students successfully? And so we will be doing this program review during the 13-14 year. And then hopefully out of that will be a 3-year master plan for technology so that everyone understands what we're trying to do with technology, that IT staff have a vision or a direction, a roadmap of where they're going, as opposed to coming in each day and saying, okay, what's going to come at me today? Because that's kind of what's happening. And then again, as we include in that, what do we need to do to support academic programs? What are the administrative requirements? Disaster recovery is right up there because it's something that we really need to think about. And then all of the end users and the hardware, the software, the support. What are we doing in terms of replacement? And then one that Klaus also mentioned that needs to be here is the whole issue of academic classrooms and the technology that's in classrooms. Is it there? Is it working in those classrooms? Is it set up the right way? Is there different things we should be doing in the classrooms with technology that we aren't doing now? And we need to look at that. And then also, if we have this investment in technology, we have millions and millions of dollars invested in technology. How are we going to stay current with it? How are we going to replace it? And we need to have a plan so that we don't get down the road and say, look at, everything's 7 years or older, what are we going to do? So that's what's kind of next. We will be looking for those people in the college community that are interested in participating in this process as we go through, so that we can try to get input from lots of different constituencies. One of the things as we came out of last week when we sat around and we did a couple different exercises and sessions, and one of them was we looked at our strengths and weaknesses and our opportunities and threats. So I'm just going to call them challenges and opportunities. These are things that came out of our discussions there. And again, this is just started the process. One of the things we do not do a good job of is bringing new employees on board. We bring them in, we might get their benefits and stuff set up, but do we really train them and give them some of the skills that they need to be able to operate, particularly with technology? They really know how to be able to get on to the different systems and that. Not only that for new employees, but then also ongoing as we change technologies, are we giving training? One of the discussions, right now there's Microsoft 2010. Well, now there's 2013. Discussion on when do we roll that out? How do we train all the people of the differences between 10 and 13, as opposed to just rolling out and say, okay, here it is. There's an online tutorial. We need to not do those kinds of things. And again, how is technology supporting student success? What are the staffing levels within technology, the right levels? Are they the right skill sets? Do we have all the right qualifications or skill sets within that staff? I've already mentioned the replacement plan. Where is technology going? Some of that discussion would be useful in terms of just what's out there, what do we see coming? Where's the whole area of mobile apps come in to start impacting on communications with students? Are we looking at that? Are we looking at the capacities that we would need to meet some of those future technology changes or the changes that are actually taking place? Again, what is the level service expectation? As faculty members, as other staff, what is your expectation of the IT staff? And then the question is, are they realistic expectations? We need to look at that because there is that cost benefit. If this is the expectation and this is the way we are set up staff-wise and operationally, we can perform at this level, and what is it going to take us to get to that level? And then, as I talked earlier about, we buy new software, we buy new hardware, and we do things, but do we really look at how they all integrate together? And that functional integration of systems is a real challenge. And we need to be aware of that and think about those things as we implement new systems. And then, again, one more time, disaster recovery. What happens if we lose power? What happens if we lose this? What if we were to lose CBI for some reason? Right now, we'd be pretty much dead in the water because everything's in one building in terms of all the core systems. So we've got a lot to do in the technology area. Really just wanted to kind of give everybody an update on what we've been doing, where we are, where I hope to be going next. And obviously one of the critical components in terms of developing this is having on-campus discussion, getting input of all those different parties that need or are affected by the systems. Because almost everything we're doing now is impacted by technology. So that's my update. Questions?
Could you put the org chart back up there? It was just a really quick, I just wanted to, because I think it is very helpful to know the structure of the group.
And that's something we have to take a look at. Is that the right structure?
Right, so it's just the way it is now.
This is the way it is right now. Yeah.
Can you actually make that public so perhaps we can't see now or something along that line?
I will actually. I'll put the presentation right on the Middle States my DCC. Yeah, there's a lot of information here. So, yeah.
I know most of us have cell phones, so in some senses you can think this is not an issue, but we got our new phones in our department, and then the network went down, and we had no phones. And I had mentioned that actually some years back when they put phones in the classroom, and I realized that if the network was out, we had no classroom phone. So is there some, and I know, I was given the answer back then, well, one of your students will have their cell phone. Well, first I was told I would have my cell phone. I said, no, I don't take my cell phone to class. And then I was told, well, one of my students would. And I understand that in some senses, I kind of go, okay, but I don't know. It's still a little alarming to me that if our network is down, none of our phones work. Is there?
It's a good point. Right now, I mean, the system that we have now is, in terms of the PBX system we have now, is very unreliable in terms of, I mean, we're pretty much holding it together. The question, and Tosh, maybe you can help me, in each of the buildings right now, with the continuous power, and it gives us about an hour to an hour and a half of power in each of the buildings, we shouldn't be losing, the network should not go down. The network should still continue to work for at least that period of an hour or more before we start losing the network.
What you call the network out is almost always on campus a power issue. And as Bill alluded to at the beginning, when we have the power issues, the switches go down and they don't come back. We sometimes have to reboot them 5, 6 times, and each reboot takes 5, 6 minutes. So the point being, what we have done now, and this is like a very big deal for the campus, because for the first time we've done something to really address the power. Each building now has what's called a centralized UPS, an uninterrupted power system. So imagine like a big container of batteries. All the switches, anything connected to those switches will function for like anywhere between 1 and 2 hours with that until the power comes back. That's a really big step towards having, more secure power for your phones.
So the reality is, that even if we were to lose building power, we should still be able to have the phones and connectivity.
We didn't lose power, it's just that all of our, whatever you call them, I haven't kept up with the virtual machines, they all cut out on us.
Well, that was a virtual desktop problem.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
But then our phones were attached to those, I guess.
No.
What happened?
I know.
It shouldn't be. So if we have those kind of things, we have to take a look at what the,
Well, all I know is it happened.
talk about that system integration.
I had no ability to call anybody, not that I wanted to call anyone anyway,
Is
but
that a setup problem or? was
I
that-
have no idea.
Yeah. So, but those are things we have to look at. The systems, the way the system should
But
work.
I'm throwing that out there. Our computers stopped working and our phones stopped working. So if that's not okay, then, well, it's not okay with me, but if it's not what's supposed to happen, somebody needs to do it.
But the way the way it's set up now, and that's one of the things about having the UPSs is that they power, our backbone is now powered. In the past, it has not. There's been no distribution of power across the backbone, which allows for the voice over IP. So the phones are running actually off the backbone, not off of another power source. So, and that's why it's tied into the emergency power backup, so that we have the ability to maintain that for a period of time, so that if we have something going on campus, gives us time to notify people, to get them off campus. As I said, is that being able to push messages out over the phone. So if
It'd be hard if our phones weren't working.
Mrs. Joanna, we'll look into
Yeah,
what
no,
happened.
no.
This was yesterday?
Yeah.
When you got the new phone?
Was it yesterday?
You got the new
Yeah,
phones
just get new phones, you had time just as.
Maybe it's not a good setup.
They were all working, we all went down through our offices, everyone had. lost their-
with all systems, there are hiccups, and if we can identify them, they'll be addressed. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. Again, we're starting the discussion on technology. Anybody that's, if anybody's interested in participating, let me know. One of the other things that we are doing, originally, this would be the last open forum for the semester. However, we do have 2 other groups that are ready, will be ready by the first part of December, so we will have an additional open forum on December 5th, and we will be talking about the mission, and we'll also be talking about student admissions and retention, I believe, or student services, right? Michael, you?
I guess so, I'll be ready. Bring it on.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, your card.